Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic, and if enjoying this then please share and like part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto awoke with a groan. Where the, white walls, bright lights, I hate hospitals. It took some effort, but he managed to sit up and promptly blinked in confusion when he saw Ino and Tamari sleeping in the chairs next to his bed. He understood why Tamari was here. She was his fiancée after all, but what in hell was Ino doing there? He stifled a snort when he saw a thin line of drool on the normally fashion-conscious girl. I wish I had a camera. I bet Sakura-chan would love a picture of this. Moving quietly, he found his clothes, and prepared one of his best jutsu, Ninpo, Hospital Escape no Jutsu, which was a very high-level move that involved him and an open window. Sadly, people who know him were prepared, and even as he jumped out the window, he found himself snagged by the collar and dragged back into the room. Nay, come on Kakashi-sensei, I hate this place. Let me go pweeease, he said, attempting to use the dreaded puppy eyes no jutsu on his sensei. Naruto, sorry. Hokage-sama threatened to burn my books if I let you get away. The lazy Jonin replied without taking his eyes from his book. Glancing up at the sleeping girls, he turned one of his infamous eye smiles on Naruto. I'm so proud of you, my little adorable little Genin. 2 girls sleeping in your hospital room. I almost feel tears of pride forming. Flushing in embarrassment, Naruto retorted hotly. It's not like that, sensei. I know why Tamari is here, I mean we're getting married, but I have no idea why she's here. He pointed at Ino. Quieting down, he asked the 2 questions burning through his head. Sensei, how long have I been out? And what happened with Tem? Kakashi stalled for time, carefully placing his book away. Well, the first question is easy to answer, Naruto. You've been unconscious for 4 days. Chuckling a bit at Naruto's groan, he paused and decided to answer the last question. As for Sasuke, they managed to keep him alive, and they even reattached his arm, but they don't think he'll ever fully recover. Sighing, he got to the worst part. Naruto, Sasuke will never be returned to active duty as a shinobi. Hearing the words, Naruto wasn't really shocked. He had seen Sasuke's arm blown off, but it still hurt. Sasuke was his teammate, and he, no one else, had destroyed a talented shinobi and ruined his friend's dreams. Can't Ba-chan fix him? She fixed bushy brows, right? That was way worse. The words just spilled from his mouth. Eyeing his student, Kakashi decided that, while painful, he needed to tell Naruto the full truth before he convinced himself that he was to blame for what happened. Naruto, even if he still had full use of his arm, Sasuke would have been pulled from the ranks. Ignoring the look of shock on Naruto's face, Kakashi pressed on. The containment seal placed over hubby Tem's curse seal, and I do like that name by the way, was reliant on Sasuke's will. He willingly broke it and drew on the power of the curse seal, directly against orders. In addition to that, he used an assassination jutsu on a fellow Leaf Nin in a friendly match. Hokage-sama has ruled that we cannot afford to have such a loose cannon. Shrugging, Kakashi placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. It wasn't your fault, Naruto. Shrugging the hand of his shoulder, Naruto stalked back over to his bed and sat down. He understood what Kakashi said, but he still felt guilt burning at him. Sasuke being removed as a shinobi as a result of his own behavior eased some of his burden, but it felt as if it was his fault for pushing him that far. If Naruto had not started their rivalry, Sasuke would have never felt the need to use the seal on him. He was pulled from his thoughts by a squeal, and suddenly found himself on the floor as he was tackled by a blonde blur. Hey, you're awake. That's awesome. Datboyo. He froze in shock as Ino continued to hold him, and he vaguely noticed that Kakashi seemed far more amused than surprised. Datboyo. What the hell? I was so worried you weren't going to wake up, Datboyo. The blonde rambled on. With another squeal, Naruto found himself being shaken. Don't ever do something like that again, Datboyo. Prying the overexcited girl off, Naruto found himself wondering exactly what sort of hell he had found himself in. His feeling of doom increased when he noticed that Temari was also awake and staring at Ino in a rather frightening manner. He began to panic as he tried to think up some sort of explanation for what was going on, but he was drawing a blank. It was like some sort of dream. Wait a minute, a dream, or a genjutsu? Forming the seal, Naruto attempted to disperse what he was convinced had to be a genjutsu. Kai, he yelled, forcing an almost visible wave of chakra across the room. To his surprise, nothing changed, except for the fact that Kakashi started laughing so hard tears formed in his eye and Ino looked rather insulted. All right, he yelled, pointing at Ino, what in hell is going on here? Ino looked sheepish, placing her hand to the back of her neck and shot Naruto what looked a lot like his foxy grin, minus the whisker marks. Anyo, it's complicated, Naruto, but there were some side effects to when I was stuck in your mind. Correctly interpreting his current facial expression to read, continue before I do something you won't like, the girl continued her story. When you stabbed yourself, and I can't believe you did that, I was able to release the jutsu, but the fox hit me in a last-ditch effort, and I was thrown through all of your memories. Naruto stared at her, horrified. Hastily, she continued trying to explain. Yes, it was really unpleasant. I never would have dreamed what you went through, but it beat being eaten by the fur ball Dadboyo. As a result of that, according to my dad, your personality was sort of merged with my own. Dad says it won't last all that long. My personality is becoming more and more dominant every day, but for now, I'm still showing some of your more irritating quirks. Without saying anything, Naruto lay back on the bed and pulled the blankets up over his head. Somebody wake me when the nightmare ends, please. Hey, that was rude, Dadboyo. A sudden thought struck Naruto like a bolt of lightning and he shot up in the bed, leaning over to whisper in Ino's ear. You have all my memories. Hi, I do. Ino whispered back. And why are we whispering? All of them. Everything I've ever done. Hi, everything. Ino smirked. I can't believe some of the stuff you got away with, but now I understand why Temari-chan, with a frown she paused and considered, I mean Temari-san, stepped in to stop you during the match with Kiba. Naruto flushed a deep red and lay back down. Okay. I think I'm gonna sleep now. Hopefully when I wake up, this will have just been a nightmare. It was several hours later when Naruto woke as door to his room opened. He sat up and cleared some of the sleep from his eyes. Hiya Ba-chan, come to spring me. Ignoring the urge to strangle him, Tsunade smirked back at him. Yeah, Gaki, you should be able to return home soon, but there's some things we have to. She was cut off by an excited yell of, Yada, easily remedied by a quick tap to his head. Ignoring the somewhat glazed look, Tsunade rapidly checked his health. She wasn't really sure why she bothered. She passed it off as the professional mednin in her, but as usual, the Gaki was in perfect health, except for a mild concussion that would clear on its own. Alright Gaki, I heard from Cyclops that you know what happened to Ino and Sasuke, but there are several things they didn't tell you. First, there was an issue caused by an overload of similar jutsu, which caused everything to be displayed to the audience. Seeing the panic in his eyes, she ruffled his hair. Yes, that means everyone knows everything. Your parents, your burden, and what you did at the end. I'm proud of you, Naruto, but I'm also angry with you. You are supposed to be Hokage after me, aren't you? Ignoring the boy's protests, she found her volume increasing to almost a yell in spite of her restraint. You took the most self-sacrificing option you had and didn't even bother to search for any other way to accomplish your goals. Damn it, Naruto, I almost lost you. Again. She wasn't sure when she started to cry, but before she knew it she was and Naruto was attempting to comfort her. Ba-chan, I know it was bad, but I really didn't see another option. I couldn't let Ino die because of the fox, and we both know he doesn't want to die. It was painful, but I stabbed myself in the stomach because it wouldn't be fatal. I figured that as soon as Ino was out, you would be able to heal me. And you did, So everything worked out. Wiping her tears, Tsunade stood up. Alright Gaki, get moving. And I'd talk to Tamari, she's been worried about you. Waving distractedly at her, Naruto began to walk out the door before he stopped and viciously smacked himself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He muttered under his breath. What's bugging you Gaki? Tsunade queried. Well, when I tried to escape this hellhole, I mean when I tried to leave the hospital earlier, I totally forgot that I have H-seals all over my home. Shrugging, he focused on the tag in his living room and smirked. Ah, taste the freedom, Ba-chan. I'm free. When he reappeared, Naruto felt that he may have jumped straight out of the frying pan and into the fire. Annoying Ba-chan was fun, if somewhat dangerous, but he hadn't thought when he flashed to his living room that he would end up in the middle of what seemed to be a kunoichi convention. Wait, why are they here? And why are they so angry? Feeling massively outnumbered, not that it intimidated him, he told himself firmly, he focused on the H-seal in the study and called out, if you need me, I'll be in my study, before he flashed away. Before the assembled women could say anything, he flashed back. Ah, almost forgot, when you are finished with our guests, I need to speak with you Tamari-chan. Flashing back to the study, Naruto let out a sigh of relief at having survived 2 trips into the kunoichi group. Naruto's surprise entrance had been a blessing for Tamari. Ever since she had arrived at her home, with Ino following her like a lost puppy, she had been swarmed by all the kunoichi that seemed to know Naruto. As the daughter of a cage, hospitality had been drilled into her from early childhood, but as the day went on, she felt like ripping her ponytails off in sheer frustration. She had been pleased that Ino decided to wait for Naruto with her. They needed to talk privately, anyway, the sooner the better. Shortly before they had arrived, they were ambushed by Tenten and a surprisingly forward Hinata, both of whom were concerned about Naruto's health, and surprisingly, with Temari's well-being. It kept escalating from there. Kurenai and Anko had crossed their path and decided to tag along, feeling it was their duty as older kunoichi to make sure the younger generation was doing well. Shizune and Sakura seemed to materialize somewhere along the way, and completely monopolized the conversation. She was surprised to find a small army of foxes milling about her yard, but surprise quickly morphed into acceptance. Life with Naruto had been like moving from one bizarre event to the next. She frowned as the foxes bowed respectfully as she passed, like she was a queen, and she hurried to get everyone inside. Being inside wasn't much better. She was immediately bombarded with questions. What were the wedding plans? Was Naruto treating her right? Was she happy? Did she miss Sunagaku? What was going on with all of the foxes? It was enough to drive a saint insane, and Tamari had been very, very close to grabbing her fan and dispensing some pain when Naruto arrived. Shooing the women out of the house was difficult, but eventually she managed to get rid of almost everyone, pointedly sending Ino into the kitchen to make ramen and wait. She needed to talk to Naruto, but after that stunt in the hospital, she also really needed to talk to her. Entering the study, Tamari found Naruto lost in thought as he stared out the window at the fox-covered grounds. Unless she was very much mistaken, the look on his face indicated he was both amused and annoyed. Silently crossing over to him, she placed her hand on his shoulder and was surprised and pleased when he absently reached up and began to gently stroke her hand. It was the first truly intimate contact they had, and it made her stomach flutter pleasantly. Nay, Tamari-chan, he spoke quietly, so as not to ruin the peaceful aura. You know anything about why our grounds are covered by foxes? I thought you knew. They were here when I came back from the hospital. It was odd though, when I passed by several of them, they bowed to me. I probably ought to figure out what's going on, then. Got something to keep you busy in the meantime? Tamari scowled. Yeah, I still have to have a chat with Ino. I have her stashed downstairs. With a sigh, Naruto stood up, giving her one last pat on the hand. Please be nice. If she really did absorb my memories, I'm amazed she didn't commit suicide. I would bet just about anything that she is using my old, cheerful idiot, mask as a cover. With a small sad smile, he gazed into Temari's eyes. Under that mask is a rage fit to burn the world, Temari. Be careful, please. Temari felt taken aback. In her irritation, she had forgotten that Naruto had a similar background to her brother. It was a miracle he had come out whole, and Ino had been forced to live those long years in mere seconds of agony. It wasn't surprising that the poor girl was clinging to the one person she knew would understand and could help her. Reaching up, she lightly ran a finger over one of Naruto's whisker marks, amusing herself at the quiet purr it caused. All right, you made your point. I'll do what I can to help her. Thanks to Mari-chan, he said with a smile that could light up the night. The sort of smile that made a woman, who grew up in an unstable world of violence, feel like everything was going to be okay. She found she couldn't help herself. She leaned down and pulled him into a firm embrace. She wasn't terribly surprised that he didn't really seem to know how to respond. Still, he wasn't fighting her, and that was more than enough. Naruto was confused. He knew what hugs were, but he really didn't think he had ever received one. It was a nice feeling, being wrapped up in someone's arms. All of his anger slipped out of him like water over a stone, and he relaxed into Temari's arms, gently returning the affection. He remembered how much she seemed to like it when he stroked her hands, and he decided to see if the same was true for her back. He was pleased with his efforts when the girl seemed to relax even more as a result. He didn't really want to end it, but they both had things to do, so he reluctantly broke away. Gomen to Mari-chan, but I need to go see about the foxes, and I believe you have someone you need to talk to. Sighing in frustration, Temari nodded her agreement and headed downstairs to check on her blonde foe. Or was it friend? Seeing the girl in question idly tapping her fingers on the table as she daydreamed, Temari braced herself and went forth to do battle, gently. Naruto entered his backyard as he considered the foxes gathered there. He knew that ever since Kyuubi's attack, foxes had not fared well in Konoha, but why had they gathered here on his estate? There were far less than he had assumed, perhaps a dozen family groups total. He hid his surprise as a large gray and red fox approached him and bowed. Greetings, Lord Regent. I beg forgiveness, but it is urgent we speak. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. What's going on here? My name is Reynard, Lord Regent. Holding up his hand to stop the fox, Naruto queried, Lord Regent. Bowing again, the fox explained. You hold Lord Kyuubi inside your body, my lord, and as such, until his return, you are his regent. Please continue, but I'm not much for formality, please just call me Naruto. Naruto responded. As you wish, Naruto-sama. We have gathered here to request sanctuary. For years, our kind have been hunted here in Konoha. All that have survived are gathered here. As our regent, we humbly request your help. Eyes widening, Naruto did another quick count. This is it, he thought incredulously. It had seemed like a lot of animals to be in one place, but if they were all that was left, their species was on the verge of extinction. Very well, Reynard. The Kitsune are welcome on these grounds. You should be safe here. I'll talk to Lady Hokage in the morning to find a more permanent solution, but is there anything I can do now? Naruto-sama. The kits need urgent care, and I fear some of our members have been poisoned from the traps set up in the woods. Their wounds are not healing as they should. If I can arrange a non-hostile veterinarian, will the others be willing? It should not be an issue, Naruto-sama, if you are present. The Kitsune find solace in your presence. With yet another sigh, Naruto waved for Reynard to follow him. I suppose we need to go see the Inuzuka clan. I'm not sure how well their Ninken will react to your presence, but I suspect I will need you. As you wish, Naruto-sama. The trip to the Inuzuka compound was something of an eye-opener for Naruto. He was used to glares of hatred or icy silence, having people wave at him as he passed, or groups of girls giggling as they followed him was downright unnerving. No one seemed to even notice Reynard trotting along beside him, and that was even stranger. He really doubted people would change their minds that fast, even if they had seen everything that happened in his head, so it was with some relief when he arrived at the Inuzuka gates. Short-lived relief when he spotted the dark-haired, feral figure of Sume Inuzuka leaning against the gates. Well, what brings Minato and Kushina's puppy to me today? Eyeing Reynard, she added, and with a guest, I see. It's to help the foxes, it's to help the foxes. Stay calm, be respectful. Taking a deep breath, Naruto and Reynard explained what happened and what help they needed as respectfully as possible. Naruto was extremely polite. He had several run-ins with Sume in the past because of his pranks, and the woman scared him even more than Crazy Snake Lady. Sume was not happy that canines, even if they were foxes, had almost been hunted into extinction near Konoha. An agreement was quickly struck allowing Inuzuka vets and their ninkin into Namikaze grounds to treat the foxes and train Naruto in animal husbandry. In return, Clan Namikaze would pay a yearly fee and would allow young Inuzuka access to fox kits as possible partners. The hope was that when members of a large and influential clan began working with fox partners, the fear and hatred of the foxes would slowly die away. Satisfied with the deal struck, and considering other options he may have regarding the foxes, Naruto and Reynard led a handful of Inuzuka vets back to the estate. Temari was having issues, specifically a blonde issue that was now wrapped around her, sobbing. She had intended to politely talk to Ino about staying the hell away from her fiancé, then work with the girl regarding her new emotional issues. Sadly, almost as soon as she got the Yamanka's attention, Ino had simply exploded. I don't get it, she screamed. I can't even go through town without wanting to kill almost everyone I meet, including myself. I see people I know I've had good times with, and then his memories flash in my head and I see how they treated him and I just want them to burn. Suddenly the girl stopped and flashed Temari a foxy grin. Nay, did you need to talk about something, Temari-chan? Temari eyed the girl, and despite everything her heart went out to her. Ino didn't have the sheer will that Naruto did to bury or channel the rage and hate, and if something wasn't done, Ino would simply explode before her normal personality resurfaced. Temari pulled the girl into a hug where she promptly broke down and cried, and almost 2 hours later, Ino was still there. Temari was not a real, touchy-feely kind of girl at the best of times, and being sobbed on for a couple of hours had not improved her mood, but it was a necessary evil. It wasn't surprising that when Naruto came wandering back in from supervising the Inuzuka vets, Temari damn near threw Ino at him. I can't deal with this anymore, you do it. She yelled as she stomped off. Naruto, how do you do it? How do you block this out? Ino begged, disregarding Temari's absence. Ino, you have to find a goal and focus everything into it. I strive to be Hokage. I put everything into it, and when I gain that goal, I will prove to everyone who ever doubted or hurt me that they were wrong. That's how I deal with it. For now, I need to ask you to go home. Talk with your dad, clear your head, do things that you, Ino, like to do. Hopefully that will help drive back my memories and let you get back on with your life. Naruto gently smiled at her. You are welcome here to talk or train whenever, Ino, but right now, I need to spend time with my fiancé. With everything that's happened, I feel I've neglected Temari. After escorting Ino out, Naruto wandered the house until he found Temari sitting on the rail of the back balcony, watching the fox kits play in the yard. Gomen, Temari-chan, he said softly to avoid startling her. I didn't realize how bad my memories were affecting her. Sighing, Temari continued to face the yard. It's not your fault. When she was clinging to me, I realized all the suffering that you and my brother suffered. If I'd tried, I could have been there for Gaara. Maybe I could have stopped him from snapping. Walking closer, Naruto wrapped his arms around her from behind. It wasn't your fault, Temari-chan. Gaara told me before he left that your father never allowed you to be near him when he was younger. When you finally met, it was already too late. But you're there for him now, and that is what's important. Temari relaxed back into his embrace, surprised with how comfortable she felt being held by the boy. In Sunagakur, everyone had feared her father or her brother, and she spent much of her time alone or with Konkuro. Somehow, the maddening and confusing boy holding her had broken through her defenses, and rather than be threatened by it, she felt safe. Tamari-chan, do you want to go out for dinner? I can show you all my favorite spots around town. She smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Yes, I think I would like that. Naruto sank into the onsen with a groan. His head fell back as he let the hot water work magic on his sore muscles. He was supremely grateful that he regenerated. It allowed him to build and tone muscle at a literally inhuman rate, but it still hurt like hell. To his immense irritation, the supremely important nature of his upcoming marriage meant he was relegated to stay within the village walls. Since Team 7 was officially disbanded, following his promotion and Sasuke being dropped from active duty, he had little to do but train. A smile found its way to his face when he thought about his recent training. He had known from the exams that Tamari was strong and brutal, but he hadn't realized how relieved he should have been that he didn't have to fight her. Her long-range attacks were dangerous as hell on their own, and coupled with her brute strength at close range, she was an absolute menace. There had been several occasions during training that he thought she might actually kill him. He was learning to fear that fan of hers. He was startled out of his thoughts and into a panic when Tamari entered the bath. Tamari-chan, he blurted, what are you doing here? She laughed loudly at him. Over the weeks of their pre-marriage relationship, she'd opened up quite a bit. She dropped her robe to reveal she'd put on a light purple bikini with gentle tribal patterns. Relax, silly boy, she said with a victorious grin, I'm wearing a swimsuit. She was further amused when the poor boy couldn't seem to take his eyes off her, jaw dropped in awe. She supposed she could tease him about it, but instead opted not to. It was sort of flattering to be admired so openly. Naruto was having issues rebooting his brain. All he knew was this was an image he wanted to remember for the rest of his life. Recovering somewhat, he motioned for her to join him and settled back into the water. That was a cruel trick, Tamari-chan. He pouted. Still snickering at the boy, Tamari sank into the water opposite him, sighing in pleasure. A peaceful silence fell between the teens and they relaxed, enjoying the others' company. Tamari was first to speak. Did you hear about the Uchiha? She questioned. A brief flash of rage crossed Naruto's face, followed by a pained look. Yeah, he said, in spoken emotions making his voice rough. Sakura-chan told me when she visited today. Apparently the great Uchiha has decided to get married. Naruto gritted his teeth and choked back his anger. She said he proposed and she's thrilled, but I don't think she realizes he doesn't care about her. He doesn't love her. He just wants to rebuild his clan, and get back at me at the same time. I never did see what you saw in that girl. Tamari stated calmly. Still, I agree. She had a whimsical smile as she continued, did I ever tell you how glad I was that my groom turned out to not be him? I'd expected it to be, once I found out my husband was from Konoha. Naruto snorted a laugh, her comment diffusing his temper as she had planned. Me too. I'd always kind of wanted to be with Sakura, but I'd never really thought about marriage or anything. I started thinking about why I like her so much. I'll tell you, if you want to listen. Pausing, he tapped his chin as he considered where to begin. No one liked me when I was a kid. Back then, I didn't know why. I thought maybe it was just because I was an orphan or something. When I was out walking, I saw a group of girls bullying a girl with pink hair, calling her, billboard brow. I scared them off, and she was still there, so I tried to talk to her. I told her I thought she was really cute, and asked her if she wanted to play. We spent all day on the playing and it was great. Naruto paused and closed his eyes sadly. It didn't last long. Her mother found out we were playing together and made a big fuss. She said Sakura wasn't allowed to play with me ever again. I didn't forget her, but when we started at the academy, it was obvious she had forgotten me. Or that's what it seemed like, but looking back I think she did remember. She was mean to me, but she never really meant to hurt me. She would say things to my face instead of behind my back. Naruto snorted. The rest you know. Lovesick fool gets assigned to a team with the girl he has crushed on for years and the tem he can't really stand but has some sort of odd bond with anyway. Tamari looked thoughtful as she let the information soak in. You're right, that explained a lot. I almost feel bad for her. Yeah, but it's what she wants, so there's nothing I can do. If I say anything, she'll just think I'm jealous. She'll have to find out on her own. Standing, Tamari draped her towel back around herself. Well, this little game is just starting, and I'll always have your back. Blushing a bit at the implications of her last statement, she hurriedly continued. Anyway, it's getting late, so I'm headed to bed. I would suggest you do the same. I've heard about your plans for tomorrow. She finished with a sneer. His groan brought a smirk to her face. As she walked back to the house, she added some extra sway to her hips when she felt his eyes on her. She had to admit, teasing was much more fun than she'd thought. Recovering from the massive nosebleed Tamari had just caused, Naruto stood up and grabbed his towel. Feeling eyes upon him, he froze, relaxing when Reynard approached him. Your mate is certainly spirited, Naruto-sama. The fox spoke with amusement in his voice. Following Naruto towards the house, he adopted a businesslike manner. Lord Regent, have you considered the matter I brought to your attention? Gritting his teeth, Naruto responded. Hi, I believe I have a solution, but I'm not sure I can convince Inoichi to cooperate. The last time a Yamanaka entered my mind, things went poorly, to say the least. Pausing at the door, Naruto faced the fox. I'll discuss it with him tomorrow after my appointment with Ba-chan. I'll let you know what he decides. Very well, Naruto-sama, the fox said with a bow. I bid you good evening, my lord. Sighing, Naruto waved goodbye and entered the house to get some rest. He had a feeling the next day was going to be above and away the hardest day of his life. Slipping through the window in imitation of both his sensei, Naruto was somewhat amazed to find Tsunade both awake and sober. Good morning, Ba-chan, he called out, ignoring the twitch over Tsunade's eye. Tsunade gently coughed into her hand and Naruto paused, then snapped to attention. Chunin Uzumaki Namikaze reporting as ordered, Hokage Ba-chan. Grumbling under her breath at being called Grandma Hokage, which was possibly even more annoying than just plain Ba-chan, Tsunade adopted a stern professional manner. With your wedding coming up a week from yesterday, we have several things we need to cover. First, I need you to create 3 clones. Tsunade made 3 of her own clones, and paired a Naruto clone with each of hers. Alright, you two, she said, pointing at the first pair, you are to go and review everything he needs to do during the wedding ceremony. We will have dignitaries from the capital and Sunagakure, so everything needs to be perfect. Pointing at the second pair, you, take him and get him fitted out with a formal kimono, and no, it is not allowed to be orange. Rolling her eyes, she turned to the last pair. Last, you are to take him and get everything prepared for the reception. Food, flowers, drinks, everything. As the clones left on their assigned tasks, Tsunade pulled out a whiteboard, several thick books and a folder that appeared to be stuffed with photos. Nay, Ba-chan, he questioned. While the clones are out doing their thing, what are we doing? Tsunade had a predatory smile as she answered. One of the holes in your education has been brought to my attention and I will need to remedy that before your wedding. She tossed one of the books at him and her smile turned truly evil. I believe it's time someone explained the birds and the bees to you, and you're just lucky I'm the best medical kunoichi there is. Naruto blanched as Tsunade began hanging medical pictures of genitalia on the whiteboard. Glancing at the book in his hands, the title made him sweat. Going somewhere, Gaki, she sneered at him. Turning around, Naruto gulped and faced his doom. Several hours later, a pale and drawn Naruto entered Konoha's premier flower shop unsteadily. If getting the talk from his Ba-chan wasn't bad enough, All three clones had dispelled, filling him with memories of complete boredom, or utter horror, in the case of the clones sent shopping. He was so distracted he didn't notice a certain blonde trying to get his attention until she smacked him upside the head. Ino still wasn't allowed to go on missions. Tsunade wouldn't sign off on her return from medical leave until she was sure the slowly simmering rage had passed. That meant she was trapped in her parents' flower shop, bored out of her skull. The door chime signaling a customer grabbed her attention and she looked up to see a distracted Naruto walk through the door. Trying and failing to get his attention, Ino decided to take a page from Forehead's book and punched him in the head. While this did get him to pay attention, Ino cursed under her breath as she rubbed her knuckles. Hitting his head really hurt. I said, she said in a near yell. What can I do for you, Naruto? Gomen. Naruto said hurriedly. I was distracted by some of the things I had to do today. Eyeing the shop inventory, he had a sudden flash of inspiration. Alright, I need some stuff for gardening. And I need to see your dad. Alright, my dad should be back shortly. He went to meet with Shikaku and Choza. Pursing her lips, she examined Naruto critically. What did you need as far as gardening supplies? Naruto just shrugged. I don't really know. He said. The garden at the estate is sort of overgrown, so we need to clear the yard. And some spots need to have grass replanted, too. Tamari has been working on a small flower garden near the house, but that's only because the original patch was growing on the stairs and we had to trim it back. That's not a lot to go with, Naruto. Can you tell me what sort of flowers and plants are currently there? She openly frowned at him when he just shrugged. Palming her face, she resisted the urge to smack him. Alright, how about I go back to your house with you and figure things out? I'll help you figure everything out. Naruto just shrugged again. That sounds like it'll work, Ino-chan. Further conversation was cut off as Inoichi entered the shop. Ah, looks like your dad is here. I'll come grab you after I finish speaking with him. Waving bye to the girl, Naruto braced himself and approached Inoichi. Good afternoon, Yamanaka-san, Naruto greeted him politely. I have business I must discuss with you. Eyeing Ino standing nearby staring attentively, he added. Privately please. Nodding to the boy, Inoichi gestured for him to follow as he headed back through the rear of the flower shop to the office. Closing the door and activating the privacy seals after an amused glance at Ino, who had followed the two, curiosity written all over her face, Inoichi moved behind his desk and sat down, waving for Naruto to have a seat as well. He drummed his fingers as he considered his guest. So, what did you need to speak with me about, Uzumaki-san? I'll get right to the point, Naruto said, sitting forward intently. I need you to help me bring someone inside my mindscape for a meeting with the fox. For a moment Inoichi couldn't believe his ears. You want me to what? I need you to help me bring someone into my mind to meet with the fox. Naruto repeated calmly. As you may be aware, several fox families have made my estate their home. What you don't know is that those foxes are all that are left in the forests near Konoha. The alpha male of the remaining foxes approached me seeking sanctuary, calling me Lord Regent. Reynard, that is his name, informed me that I am Lord Regent of the foxes due to their Lord Kyubi being sealed inside me. Nodding his understanding, Inoichi considered the new information. Obviously foxes weren't popular after Kyubi's attack, but he hadn't known that they had almost been exterminated. Kyubi being Lord of the Foxes wasn't too surprising, it was a giant fox after all. Still, he didn't understand how the foxes knew whom Kyubi was sealed in, and more importantly, who would want to meet the fox. I see from your expression you still don't understand my request. I need to speak with Kyubi regarding the foxes, but I want to take Reynard as well. I can enter my mindscape, but I can't take anyone with me. That is where you come in. I'm willing to pay S rank for the mission and you do not have to come anywhere near the fox. I just need Reynard transported in. Inoichi sat back as he considered the offer. True, he could use the pay. S rank was really nice and it sounded easier than most. Still, Anything dealing with the fox was a major security issue for Konoha. Very well, he said. You'll need to turn in a mission request and have it approved by the Hokage. Anything dealing with your tenant could be a security issue. Once you have the mission request in, I will need to meet Reynard. I'm not sure if a fox can actually meditate, but if I can teach him to do so, the process will be much smoother. I figure with your wedding approaching, and the need to recover after it, he said with a small smile Naruto didn't really get, we can do this in 2 weeks or so. I understand, Naruto said standing. I'll go get the paperwork in. Ba-chan might have something to add. If you want to meet Reynard, I'm headed home and Ino is already coming along to survey the damage to the garden. If you wish, you're more than welcome to come along as well. Deactivating the privacy seals, Inoichi ushered Naruto from the office. I don't have anything else right now, and I'm curious to see the garden you're talking about anyway. Entering the flower shop proper, Inoichi addressed his daughter. Ino, looks like I'm coming with you to the Namikaze estate tonight. Is there anything you need before we go? Rolling up the taijutsu scroll she had been reading and darted for the door. I'm ready to go anytime, Daddy. She chirped. Inoichi eyed his daughter with amusement. Minding the shop isn't that bad, hun. You don't have to act like you want to be anywhere but here, you know. Rolling her eyes, Ino ran and pushed her dad out the door, grabbing Naruto's hand in passing and yanking him out as well. Slamming the door closed, she turned and jumped in the air, arms stretched out. Woohoo! Freedom datboyo! Clapping her hand over her mouth, she glared at her smirking companions. Not a word, she yelled and stomped off. Smiling at each other, Naruto and Inoichi set off for the Namikaze estate. Several minutes passed and Naruto broke the silence. Nay, Yamanaka-san, how long till she realizes she went the wrong way? Inoichi never answered. He just started laughing. Ino caught up before Naruto made it home, and her glare warned the guys not to say anything about it. Entering the grounds, Naruto was mobbed by a handful of excited fox kits, sending Ino into cuteness overload. With a loud, kawaii, Ino scooped up one of the kits and began hugging it, much to Naruto's amusement. It had taken several days before Tamari could get close to the kits without shorting out. Must be a girl thing. Kneeling, Naruto addressed one of the older females keeping an watchful eye on the kits. Would you please get Reynard? Tell him to meet us in the garden. The vixen nodded and headed back into the trees on the far side of the grounds. Turning to his guests, Naruto spoke. Well, Reynard will meet us there, so let's go check out the garden. Both Inoichi and Ino let out low toneless whistles as the somewhat trashed garden came into view. They were impressed by the potential to be found, but 14 years of neglect followed by the ministrations of an army of inept clones trying to garden had left it a complete mess. Sweet Kami, Ino screeched. What the hell did you do to this poor garden? Stepping back away from the irate girl, Naruto waved his hands defensively. Wait, hold on, this was completely overgrown when I inherited it. All I did was send something like 100 clones to try to clean it up. With a sniff of disdain, Ino turned and stalked away, surveying the garden for its needed repairs. Inoichi just sort of loitered listening to Naruto muttering under his breath with a smile. Ah, this generation truly is something, isn't it, Minato? He perked up when a large gray and red fox approached Naruto. Good evening, Naruto-sama, the fox said, startling Inoichi. Evening, Reynard. Naruto cheerfully returned. Jerking a thumb at Inoichi, Naruto did introductions. Reynard, this is Inoichi Yamanaka, head of a clan here in Konoha that specializes in the arts of the mind. I see, Reynard replied. Facing Inoichi, Reynard bowed. Good evening, Yamanaka-san, as Naruto-sama stated, my name is Reynard. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Anyo, I am pleased to meet you as well, Reynard. Inoichi replied a bit uncertainly. Naruto didn't tell me the fox spoke, but that should make things easier, I guess. My apologies if I seem surprised, but I wasn't informed you could speak. Naruto looked a little put out. I told you we were going to talk with the Kyuubi. What did you think that meant? Inoichi palmed his face. Never mind. He gritted out. Looking far more cheerful, he continued. This is actually a good thing as far as the mission goes. Reynard, for me to bring you into Naruto's mind, I'm going to have to teach you to meditate. You being able to speak with me should make the process go much smoother. Truly excellent news, Yamanaka-san. The fox replied. May I inquire as to when we will be doing this training? Also, how long will this take? Inoichi tapped his chin as he thought. I'm not sure how long it will take. Most I teach don't take more than a few sessions, but they were all human. As for when, we have 2 weeks at a minimum with Naruto's upcoming wedding. Before Reynard could respond, Ino came storming up, slowing in caution at the sight of the large fox. Daddy, she exclaimed, this is going to take forever to fix, but I have a list of supplies Naruto Baka is going to need. Handing the scroll to her father, Ino stuck her tongue out playfully at Naruto. You're gonna need someone to show you what you're supposed to be doing as well, Whiskers. It's going to take a while. Inoichi's eyes bugged slightly at the amount listed on the scroll. Adding the costs up in his head, he had to hold back laughter. Haha, between this and that S-rank pay he offered, I'll be able to afford one of Ino and her mother's little shopping sprees and still have sake money left over. When he looked up, Ino was looking at him in a distressingly knowing manner. Ah crap, there goes my sake money. Excuse me Lord Regent, Yamanaka-san, but I believe I have a solution for both the garden issue and also my meditation training. Seeing interested looks on both Naruto and Inoichi's faces, and ignoring Ino's wide-eyed shock, Reynard described his solution. I need training, and Naruto-sama needs someone to teach him to care for the garden. I smell the scent of flowers and potting soil on your kid Yamanaka-san. Am I correct in assuming she would have the skill to teach Naruto-sama? Yes, she is quite capable of that. I've taught her horticulture for most of her life. Very well. My suggestion is that I come stay with you until we mind walk, and Ino-san stays here to teach Naruto-sama. Naruto went completely pale. Ino had a sort of bemused smirk and Inoichi was visibly conflicted. By far more experienced than the two younger humans, Inoichi was the first to recover. If you are willing to sleep in one of the greenhouses, you are more than welcome. However, I'm not ready to let Ino stay over for several weeks with a boy, not to mention Naruto is getting married in just under a week. Ino was nodding her head until her father made the mistake of saying, let her. She had an evil gleam in her eye as she laced into her father. See this father. She spat, pointing at her Hittite. This says that I'm an adult and you can stuff, let her, straight down an Akamichi toilet. She paused in her rant, fist raised near her father's face when she noticed Naruto edging away. And where do you think you're going, Whiskers? Naruto froze, opened his mouth, then disappeared in a brilliant yellow flash, leaving Ino standing there shaking with rage. Grr. When I get my hands on him, how dare he leave when I was yelling at him? Losing Naruto as a target, she turned back to her father. Inoichi, while annoyed at being left to face his daughter, was also quietly amused. That was almost exactly like the time after Kushina got pregnant. Minato had said something about her gaining weight. Not listening to his daughter, while maintaining an outward appearance of rapt attention, Ino continued down memory lane. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Minato constantly flashing away as Kushina destroyed everything in her way. Ino's rant at her father was stopped as Naruto flashed back into the garden with an arm wrapped around Temari. He suspected that she knew he didn't need to hold her quite that tight to transport her, but she wasn't complaining and Naruto found he liked holding her close. Reluctantly letting Temari go, Naruto held up a hand to forestall an outburst from Ino. No, I didn't run away, he said quietly to force the temperamental girl to shut up and listen. I went to go get Temari-chan. She does live here, and in less than a week will be my wife. I figure that since this would affect her, she should know what's going on. Not to mention she is way stronger than you, Ino-chan, and you know it. Temari already knew what was going on thanks to a quick briefing from Naruto before he flashed them back to the garden. So, she said with a smirk, we trade the overly formal fox with Flower Girl for the next few weeks, huh? Ignoring Ino's glare at the nickname, she considered. I don't really have a problem with it. It's not like we don't have extra room here. And it will be nice to have the garden all fixed up. I don't know much about maintaining plants in this kind of climate. Inoichi seeing the look on his daughter's face and sighed in defeat. After some minor haggling with Naruto on the cost of both the supplies needed and Ino's services, Inoichi left, taking Reynard and Ino with him. Naruto said, taking a quick glance at the sky to check the time. It's still early, Temari-chan. You want to do something? Temari considered that, it's too late to spar, and we've both already eaten. I feel like a quiet night in. Tell me, do you play shogi? I know of it, Naruto replied. But if you're willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn how to play. Motioning for Temari to follow, Naruto led the way inside. I don't get it, Temari said, half hysterically. I know Temari-chan. Naruto grumbled lifelessly. No, I really don't get it. I just taught you to play a few hours ago. I know Temari-chan. Arg, you have no strategy, you make the most bizarre moves, but I can't beat you. Temari yelled in frustration. I don't know Temari-chan. It's just like in a fight, I just sort of do things. Naruto said with a shrug. Stifling a yawn, alright, I have some things to do tomorrow before I go pick up Ino-chan. I'm headed to bed. Struck by a sudden impulse, Naruto walked behind Temari and gently rubbed her shoulders briefly. Giving the girl a quick kiss on the cheek, Naruto headed upstairs. Good night, Tsunaheim. Temari was floored, not saying anything as she watched him head up the stairs. Raising her hand to her cheek, she smiled gently. He had surprised her with the brief shoulder rub, it had felt great but she hadn't been expecting the kiss at all. It was very sweet, she thought with a blush. She missed her brothers and the dessert, but little things like tonight reminded her that her life was good. The next week passed quickly. Ino may have been a giant pain but she knew her stuff and the garden began to show its natural beauty. Naruto found, to his surprise, that Ino was fairly pleasant company without Sasuke around. He had enjoyed working the garden with her and even Temari pitched in, though plants weren't really her thing. She was no good with the local plants, but Ino had promised they could convert a greenhouse to maintain some plants from her home country. Time passed all too quickly for Naruto. Before he knew it, he was standing outside the shrine, bracing himself to go through with getting married. Naruto nervously checked himself over in the mirror. His only alteration to the black formal kimono had been the addition of his family crest on the back, emblazoned in burnt orange. Peering closer at his reflection, he had to admit, he did look pretty good, even if no one else seemed to like the color scheme. Seriously, it looked awesome and it wasn't like it was the old neon orange his jumpsuit had been. Even he knew better than to wear that shade at such a formal event. He suppressed his frown as he considered that last thought. This was turning out to be an even larger event than he could have imagined. Not only was Ba-chan officiating, but both the Fire and Wind daimyos were in attendance along with their attendants. Given the high potential for disaster, Temari had been given strict orders by Tsunade, in front of Naruto no less, that she was to keep him tightly under control. Naruto snorted. If he were Hokage and had someone as troublesome as himself, he would have kept them far away from an event like this. Hey, too bad for Ba-chan that it's my wedding. Wonder if she has an ulcer yet. A knock brought Naruto out of his thoughts, and Iruka entered the room. Hey Naruto. The scarred Chunin said. You ready for this? Holding his hand out so Iruka could see the slight tremor, Naruto responded. As ready as I can be, Iruka-sensei. Turning back to the mirror for one last check of his appearance, he sighed. I know what to do, and why I'm doing it, and I can honestly say that I do like Temari-chan, but this is not how I ever saw myself in the future, ya know. Stepping forward, Iruka helped Naruto make a few adjustments. I'm proud of you, he said softly. You're facing your duty head on and trying to make the best of it. In circumstances like this, that's really all you can do. Checking his watch, Iruka motioned Naruto towards the door. Alright, it's time. Following Iruka mostly on autopilot, Naruto felt the world go somewhat surreal as he entered the shrine. The seats were all filled, and Naruto gulped as he realized he had to go and stand out in front of this many people. Scanning the crowd, he saw most of his friends with their families and he couldn't help but smile a little when he saw most of them looked almost as uncomfortable as him. Reaching the altar, he turned to face the crowd, forcing himself to not show his emotions. If he remembered correctly, he had a few minutes until Tamari would make her appearance, something about Sunagaku tradition. He really hadn't been paying too much attention. Using the time, he decided to study the people he would be dealing with in the future. With the exception of Sasuke, all the other clan heads were attending and he had to admit, they had some great poker faces. His nervousness increased when he noticed the fire daimyo studying him. Naruto prided himself on his ability to read people, but he simply couldn't read the daimyo at all. In his brief meeting with the man, the only thing he had been able to determine about him was that apparently he really liked his fan. Naruto was almost shocked out of his blank face when he noticed Madame Shijimi sitting next to her husband, holding Tora as tightly as usual. Oh dear Kami, the demon cat is attending my wedding, he thought blankly. The strains of the wedding march announced Temari's entrance, drawing Naruto's attention from the crowd and to his bride. Her beauty simply took his breath away. She dressed in a perfect combination of traditional clothes from both countries, embracing Konohagakure in her formal white kimono, and Sunagaku in the red additions to otherwise traditional white makeup. She had decided to wear a watabashi, a plain white hood, instead of a sunokakushi, and attached was a thin veil in the Sunagaku tradition of obscuring the bride's face. Naruto had to hide a small smile. A sunokakushi would have implied Tamari intended to be a gentle and obedient wife. He didn't see her in that role, and had jokingly commented on it while they were planning the ceremony. Tamari had launched him into the wall for it. Ah, good times. He allowed his smile to show when he saw Gaara escorting his sister. In Konohagakure tradition, the father would be the one to escort their bride. In the event of his absence, the oldest brother, or barring that another male relative or friend, would take his place. Kankuro, by age, should have been the one to escort Tamari to her future husband, but Naruto had strongly believed it would be good for all of them if Gaara was the one to do so. It would demonstrate the rift in their family was mended, and it was very important for Gaara as well. Watching the care Gaara was taking as he escorted his sister, Naruto felt vindicated. While he maintained his usual stoic expression, Naruto could see the happiness in his fellow Jinchuriki's eyes. As Gaara released his sister, Naruto nodded to Gaara with a smile and was rewarded when the corner of his mouth twitched up in response. Looking over at Tamari, Naruto noticed she had seen it as well and he could simply feel her joy radiating off her. Tamari stood facing her fiancé, hands clasped with his as Tsunade began the ceremony. While still unhappy about being married off for the village, especially to someone 3 years younger, she took some measure of joy in the fact that her situation could have been a lot worse. The marriage was one of duty. Naruto didn't love her, just like she did not love him. Still, the potential for love was there and Tamari had found herself very fond of the little blonde goofball. People seemed to think he was some sort of idiot, and at times he could be, but he could also be surprisingly thoughtful, as evidenced by his suggestion that Gaara escort her at this wedding. So it was with a light heart that she smiled down at him and bent his wrists back when he seemed to space out during Tsunade's speech. The pain from his wrists being bent snapped Naruto out of the daydream the boring ceremony had caused, and he had to hide a wince when he saw the way Tamari was staring at him. The look had both sympathy and a promise of severe pain, an odd mix to be sure, and Naruto decided he would not be spacing off again. Hey, no wonder Shikamaru called her troublesome during the exam. Not that he doesn't call most women that, but still. Reaching the end of the purification ritual, Tsunade unsealed the traditional sake and Naruto couldn't stop a small tremor as he reached forward to take a cup. Once he and Tamari exchanged these sake cups, it was done. They would be married. Taking a deep breath, Naruto held the cup for her to drink from, as she held his. The rice wine burned as Naruto completed the San Sankudo, claiming Tamari as his wife. Taking the cups, he placed them back on the white cloth-covered tray and turned back to his wife. Tamari-chan, he said hesitantly, but with increasing strength as he continued. Our marriage is one of duty, our honor for the village. I wasn't expecting this, and I know you weren't either, but the past month has been very happy for me and I thank you for that. Breaking from wedding protocol, Naruto drew Tamari to her feet as he stood and faced the crowd. I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, clan head of Clan Uzumaki and Clan Namikaze. Pulling the stunned girl forward to face the crowd with him, Naruto continued. This is Uzumaki Namikaze Tamari, my wife. Our marriage is a symbol of the renewed alliance between Sand and Leaf and as such, my oath to you Tamari-chan. You are my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. May our joining be blessed by Kami-sama and the union of our peoples as well. Tamari was stunned, floored at her husband's actions. This sort of thing just was not done at a formal state event. Konohagakure's rules had been much more lax than Tsunagaku, but this went beyond that. He went off script, tossed in veiled insults at the Konohagakure council, and he was getting away with it. Gazing over the crowd and seeing most everyone in the crowd fired up and excited at her husband's speech, she was simply stupefied. In future years, Tamari would state that this was the moment she knew that her husband would one day become Hokage. With a large smile of satisfaction, Naruto faced his wife and drew a box from a storage seal on the arm of his kimono. Opening it up, he took out a heavy gold ring and smiled at her. Tamari-chan, it is customary here in Konoha that husband and wife exchange rings and so I had this made for you. Tamari eyed the ring curiously as Naruto placed it on her left ring finger. It was fairly large, the center holding a diamond surrounded by an Uzumaki swirl. One side of the ring had Suna's hourglass emblazoned and the other had the leaf insignia. It was very thoughtful on her husband's part, a symbol of her past, present and future all wrapped together. He does something like this, just to make me happy. Holding her hand up to stare at the ring in wonderment, Tamari was struck with a thought. You said we exchange rings. Where is yours? Naruto's smile widened as he drew another ring from the seal. This one is mine. I would be honored if you would place it on my finger. He said as he handed her the box. Drawing the ring from the box, Tamari noted that the plain gold band was very much like her own, though the diamond had been replaced with an engraving of a nine-tailed fox. Startled, she glanced at her husband and he smiled somewhat sadly at her. It seemed wrong to not include it, Tamari-chan. It's part of me. Nodding her acceptance, she slid the ring onto his finger, then decided to reward him for his thoughtfulness earlier. Pulling him towards her, she cupped his face and leaned down to give him a passionate kiss. At first, Naruto had stiffened defensively, but when he began to kiss her back, Tamari felt it throughout her body. Breaking the kiss, Tamari blushed at the amused expression on Tsunade's face. Sweet Kami, what was that? Composing herself, Tamari remembered that she had something she still needed to do. Ignoring her rather dazed husband, Tamari tossed a bouquet into the gathered women, then linked arms with her husband. There was a sense of general amusement in the crowd when the bouquet was caught by a blushing Ino Yamanaka. Tamari and Naruto, arms linked, exited the shrine and headed back to their home for the wedding reception. Across town, things were not so festive. The wedding of Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura had been well attended, but only by civilians from Konoha. Inwardly, Sasuke had seethed that pretty much everyone of importance in Konoha had attended Naruto's wedding and all he had was the civilians. The cheers of those gathered meant nothing to him as he went through the motions of the short ceremony. He had needed a kunoichi to restart his clan, but after he was crippled by the dobi, the only one interested was Sakura. At first, Sasuke had been enraged, but then he realized that marrying Sakura would advance two goals. First, he had a kunoichi with whom to breed more Uchiha, and second, marrying Sakura would be a strong strike to the dobi. As he listened to her inane babble about how happy she was and how excited she was to be his wife, Sasuke began to regret his choice. Married for 5 minutes and I already want to strangle her just to shut her up. With a grunt, Sasuke led Sakura towards his compound, but in his mind all he could think was damn you dobi. At the Namikaze estate, things were just straight chaos. Someone had let Lee have sake and after an amazing amount of damage, Tsunade had finally bludgeoned the boy into unconsciousness. Being surrounded by people tended to make Naruto a bit twitchy, so he escaped the crowd into the garden after attending to his duties as host. He wasn't terribly surprised to find Gaara there. He suspected Gaara wasn't terribly fond of crowds either. Carefully approaching him, a startled Gaara was likely to be a lethal one. Naruto sat down next to his new brother-in-law. "Evening, brother," he said, leaning back to watch the sunset over the trees of the garden. "Good evening, brother," Gaara replied with his usual monotone. Sitting in silence suited the two Jinchuriki as they watched the sunset. After a few minutes, Naruto decided to break the companionable silence. "Nay, Gaara, I have a favor to ask of you." "You require a favor from me?" Gaara asked with some disbelief. People did not simply ask him for favors. The only thing close he could think of was people begging him not to kill them. Until recently, he'd been disinclined to listen, so doing a favor was something new. "Yeah," Naruto responded as he began to pace. "I've been doing what I can to try to make Temari happy, but I know, even if she won't admit it, that she misses you, Kankuro in the desert. I'm happy that you are concerned about my sister's happiness," Gaara said, picking his words carefully. "I fail to see what you need from me." "Well, how much sand can you make?" Naruto asked. The corner of his mouth twitched up as Gaara replied. "Naruto, I can make as much sand as I want." "That's awesome, Datboyo," Naruto exclaimed, jumping up, fist raised in triumph. "Okay, so as you can see, I have a lot of ground here, and I want you to turn that corner to the south into a desert. Ino said she'll get some native plants, so we can make it just like Suna." Gaara blinked at the odd request but was saved from responding as Temari came swooped out of the sky on her fan. "That's very sweet of you, husband," she said, "but I really don't need you to do something like that." Temari wrapped Gaara up in a hug. "Hello again, little brother. The crowd has thinned out some if you want to head back to the house." Gaara nodded his thanks and headed back to the house, pausing when Temari spoke up again. "Gaara, thank you for escorting me at the wedding." Gaara nodded solemnly and his mouth twitched into his almost smile. "You are welcome, Temari." Watching her brother leave, Temari wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Her little brother was still doing well even without he. It was a bittersweet feeling. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that Naruto looked very proud as he watched her brother, and it hit her then that Naruto might be even happier about Gaara's reformation than she was. The insight told her that Naruto had viewed Gaara as a brother even before the marriage. That's not a bad thing either, she thought. "Come along, little husband," she said with a smirk, linking her arm with his. "We still have some guests." Temari laughed at his pouting and mutters of, "I'm not that short," as she guided him back to the reception. It didn't take too long for the remainder of the guests to leave, and Naruto grudgingly created clones to clean up the mess. Ignoring the grumbling of the clones, Naruto headed inside to find Temari wearing a robe and waiting for him. "Ah, I have been waiting for you, husband," she said as he entered the house. "I have prepared the bath for you. I shall wash your back." It didn't quite sound like an offer. Naruto eyed Temari warily, fairly certain she had gone crazy. "That's fine, Temari-chan, but I can wash myself, you know." Temari felt her eye twitching in irritation. Okay, that's obviously not gonna work, she said, her irritation at her husband's dense nature boiling over as said husband inched towards the stairs. Naruto, it's our wedding night. Yeah, and that means what? Naruto asked curiously, taking a deep breath, and throttling back some of the temper she was infamous for. Tamari smiled sweetly at him. Naruto, it's our wedding night. Yes, I know that, I'm not getting why you're stressing it though. Oh, for Kami's sake, Naruto, did you, or did you not get, the talk, from Tsunade-sama a week ago? Blushing, Naruto stared at his feet. Yeah, but what does that have to do with anything? Tamari glared at her husband. You know, if I didn't know for a fact that this isn't an act, I would kill you painfully. Taking a deep breath, Tamari decided that it was best to stop dancing around the subject. Naruto, on the wedding night, the wedding is consummated. Seeing his blank stare, Tamari damn near screamed in frustration. Oh, Naruto said, still staring at his feet. That's okay, you don't have to, Tamari-chan. I know you don't really want to. Sighing, Tamari palmed her face. It's not that simple, Naru-kun. Our marriage isn't really considered valid until it's consummated, which means we really don't have a choice tonight. Noting the rather frightened look on her husband's face, Tamari forced herself to smile at him. Alright, look, go wash up and then go to your room. I'll take care of this, okay? Alright, Tamari-chan. Naruto mumbled as he headed to the bathroom to clean up. Watching him go, Tamari had to resist the urge to tear her top ponytails out in sheer frustration. This was not a problem she had ever considered, not that she had ever really thought about it really. Alright, so he is like a much nicer version of Gaara. It's not that he doesn't want me, I could see that in his eyes, but. Ah, that's it, he's scared. So, how do I get him to relax? It would be so much easier to just forget about this, but questions will be asked, and I don't think he could lie about this in a believable manner. TCH, how troublesome. Oh, I did not just think that. Deciding on a course of action, Tamari headed to Naruto's room to prepare. Naruto dressed himself in his usual sleeping clothes, boxers and a t-shirt, and hesitantly headed to his room. It wasn't that he didn't want to be with Tamari, she was hot with a capital HOT, but he really wanted her to want him. Being forced just didn't feel right to him, and anyone that knew Naruto knew about his rather overdeveloped sense of justice. Opening the door, he blinked in confusion. The room was dark, lit by small candles placed about the space, shadows dancing in the room. Tamari glided across the room to him with a low chuckle. Taking his hand, she led him to the bed and sat him on the edge. Naruto was very confused. When he left her to bathe, Tamari had seemed angry and irritated, but the woman in front of him showed no signs of frustration or anger. She seemed rather serene, which wasn't really something he associated with Tamari at all. He flinched when she ran her hand over his cheek. Gomen, Tamari-chan. He whispered. I've always been alone, I'm not used to being touched. He turned his face away from her, embarrassed at his confession. Dear Kami, Tamari thought to herself. What the hell did this village do to him? It shouldn't be this damn difficult to seduce a teenage boy, especially when we're freaking married. With a throaty chuckle, Tamari gently brought Naruto's face back to hers. Meeting his eyes, she almost drowned at the depth they showed, the pain and loneliness normally hidden from the world. Slowly, so as not to startle him, she leaned forward, placing her forehead against his. Cupping his cheek, she gently ran her thumb along one of the whisker marks on his face, and she felt him relax slightly. Pulling back just a bit, she stared him straight in the eyes. Naruto, she said gently, you don't have to be alone anymore. For better or worse, I will always be with you. She was amazed at the dawning hope she saw in his eyes, and she nearly smirked when she noticed a bit of lust as well. Finally, some progress. Now I just have to get him to relax some more, and then we can get down to business. She mentally smacked herself. Don't think like that, Tamari, or you'll end up scaring him off. Ignoring the byplay in her head as an unneeded distraction, Tamari softly kissed him. This time, he didn't fight her and the kiss rapidly deepened. When Naruto wrapped his arms around her, she felt a jolt that almost seemed to curl her toes. Breaking off, she panted, out of breath. Kami-sama, what was that? Naruto had a downcast look and Tamari blinked as she realized he thought she had broken the kiss because it was bad. She frowned a bit as she realized again that for all his undeniable strength, her husband could also be very fragile. When he tried to pull away from her, Tamari pulled him up against her chest. No, you can't get away that easy, Naru-kun, she said with a teasing lilt to her voice. Relaxing at the tone Tamari used, Naruto was still somewhat confused. If she wasn't angry because he was a bad kisser, why had she pulled away? Gomen Tamari-chan, I promise I'll get better at kissing. Hearing that, Tamari went a bit wide-eyed. He wants to get better. He damn near knocked me out with the last one. Chuckling low in her throat again, Tamari pushed Naruto back further onto the bed. Lose the shirt, Naru-kun. His flush of embarrassment when he did as she instructed amused her, and she mentally whistled at his revealed physique. I knew he took his training seriously, but damn, he is pretty buff for his age. Wonder why he hides it behind those bulky jackets. Alright, now lay down on your stomach. To his credit, Naruto did as he was told, but he was curious. Nay, Tamari-chan, why, I'm going to give you a massage. Tamari responded as she undid the obi of her robe. Shrugging the robe off, Naruto had no clue that she was straddling his waist. Tamari began to work his shoulders, occasionally running her nails lightly down his back. Naruto was in heaven. He had no idea that simple touch could feel so good, and when she ran her nails down his back, he just didn't know how to describe it. As he blissed out, a stray thought struck him. If it feels this good, I should really learn how to do it, and repay her. Feeling extremely turned on, Naruto rolled over on his back and froze when he saw her. So beautiful, those legs, and those curves. She is so beautiful. Tamari-chan. Silencing him with a finger on his lips, Tamari leaned down to kiss him. Shish. Don't worry, I want this. The night wasn't perfect, of course, neither had any experience and mistakes were made. Perfect would have been the scions of the Yondaime Kazekage and Hokage. No, it was simply Naruto and Tamari, and the night was filled with giggles, gasps and moans. It was late in the night when the teens finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. Across town, things weren't as happy. Sakura was curled up in the corner of the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. She didn't understand it. She had gotten the man she had chased for years. Why wasn't she happy? She dreamed of marrying her Sasuke-kun, but it had been nothing like she wanted. She was supposed to heal his heart and they would be happy together forever, so why was he so cold? She held her hand up to examine her ring, the one that marked her as Sasuke's. Why was she suddenly seeing it as Chain? Why was she feeling that she may have made a huge mistake? Forcing her sore body to move, Sakura shuffled back to her bed and curled into a ball. Muffling her sobs in her pillow, she let the tears come. Morning dawned, bright and early, and Naruto jerked awake at a pounding on his bedroom door. Naruto! Ino yelled from the other side. Hokage-sama told me to come get you and take you and Tamari to her office. Get up, ya lazy bum. Tiredly Naruto shook Tamari's shoulder. Come on, Tamari-chan, Ba-chan wants to see us. He said around a yawn. Masdai GQKSFA. Tamari mumbled into her pillow. Translating that to mean, it's too damn early for this shit, Naruto felt himself agreeing. Ino pounded on the door again and Naruto casually asked Tamari if she thought there was somewhere on the grounds they could hide Ino's body. Not getting a response, Naruto noticed Tamari had fallen back asleep. Oh, how I wish I could, he thought blearily. When Ino pounded on the door and yelled again, Naruto stalked over and threw the door open. All right already, he yelled at the suddenly pink-faced Kunoichi. Naruto found himself further irritated as Ino just stood there growing redder. What? Blushing, Ino couldn't say anything, just pointed down, and Naruto realized it was somewhat drafty. Glancing down, he suddenly realized he wasn't wearing any clothes and ducked behind the door, hands clasped over his crotch. Okay, I'm awake. Go wait downstairs, Ino-chan. He called from his hiding spot. Oh, and Ino-chan, this never happened. Got it. Squeaking a bit in response, Ino darted downstairs to wait, face still flaming. Quickly getting dressed, Naruto headed downstairs and brewed Tamari her morning tea. He figured that she was going to need it if he wanted to see her get out of bed anytime soon. Ignoring Ino, who was sitting in the living room staring off into space, Naruto loaded several breakfast items on a tray with the tea and went to wake his wife, again. Tamari woke to the smell of raspberry tea and the feel of a soft kiss on the crown of her head. Groggily looking up, she saw a tray with breakfast and Naruto stirring sugar into a mug of tea. Good morning, Tamari-chan, he said. Ba-chan wants us in her office. She sent Ino to get us, so I brought you breakfast. Smiling brightly, he picked up her robe and placed it near her on the bed. I'm going to go finish getting ready for the day. Meet you downstairs. Stretching out with a yawn, Tamari nodded her agreement. Getting up from the bed, she slid her robe on and stretched to work out some of the kinks. She was fairly sore from the night's activities, but she'd had training sessions leave her in far worse shape, so she wasn't really worried. Idly she noticed from the corner of her eye that Naruto was sort of staring off dreamily, and the trickle of blood from his nose made her realize she had more or less flashed him when she got out of bed. Oh well, at least I know he finds me attractive. Sighing, she lightly whacked him on the head to get his attention. Alright, I'm up, go do whatever it is you need to do and I'll meet you downstairs when I'm ready. Watching him more or less skip out the door, Tamari rubbed her temples with another sigh. He's a good guy, but no one should have that much energy in the morning. Downstairs waiting for Tamari, Naruto was amusing himself by seeing how close he could get to the spacing out Ino before she noticed. So far, he had managed to get almost to where he could reach out and touch her, but he smirked as an idea struck him. Cupping his hands around his mouth, he yelled, "Good morning, Ino-chan." He laughed when the startled girl fell off the chair she was sitting on, but gulped when she stood up flushed with rage. That's not funny, Naruto baka. The blonde screeched, first raised to smack him. The blow never landed as Tamari arrived in time to catch the punch. Tisk tisk, flower girl, Tamari said with her usual smirk, you can't hit my husband. Hearing this, Naruto childishly stuck his tongue out at Ino. That's my job, Tamari continued, rolling her eyes as she whacked the back of Naruto's head. Rubbing his head, Naruto whined. Tamari-chan, that hurt. Tamari rolled her eyes again while Ino giggled at the two. Good, it was supposed to. Naruto was about to reply when Ino cut in. Not that this isn't amusing, but if I don't get you two to Tsunade-sama's office soon, she is gonna kill me. Nodding, Naruto offered his arm to Tamari and was somewhat surprised when she accepted and linked arms with him. Odd, I didn't think she liked to show affection in public. Oh well, I'm not gonna complain. As they followed Ino out into the village proper, Naruto noticed Tamari was walking stiffly with a slight limp. Leaning closer to her, he whispered, "Nay, Tamari-chan. Are you alright?" Whispering back, Tamari reassured him. I'm fine, Naruto, just a little sore from last night. Noticing the flash of sadness on his face, Tamari was quick to interject. No, don't blame yourself for this. I promise you that you did nothing wrong. This is just what happens, okay? Naruto searched her face, but seeing nothing but the truth of her words, he forced himself to smile. She might be right and it was just what happened, but he still wasn't happy he had hurt his Tamari-chan. My Tamari-chan, huh? I guess she is. The rest of the trip passed quickly, Tamari and Naruto chatting pleasantly as they strolled arm in arm behind Ino. Entering the Hokage's office, Naruto and Tamari both dropped into cautious stances when they saw Sasuke and Sakura were already there. Trading concerned glances, Tamari slid back slightly to allow her a better angle to watch her husband's back. She wasn't truly expecting a fight, but it never hurt to be prepared. Naruto was examining his former teammates and not liking what he saw. Sasuke stood stiffly wearing a dark blue kimono, Uchiha fan emblazoned on the back. His left arm, the one Naruto had blown off, was held in a sling under the kimono, making the formal robe seem slightly off, like it didn't quite fit. Naruto wasn't sure exactly how bad the damage his explosive clone had caused to Sasuke other than the arm, but the scars on his face had permanently taken the pretty boy title from him. What really struck Naruto was the visible hatred Sasuke showed when he caught sight of Naruto. Looking into his former friend's eyes, Naruto could see Sasuke's desire to kill him. Figures the Tem would blame me for what happened, Naruto thought bitterly while keeping a bland expression on his face. Keeping that fixed expression became much harder when he glanced at Sakura. She was dressed to match her husband, same dark kimono and crest, but unlike Sasuke, who was actively glaring at everyone in the room, Sakura seemed to be trying to sink into her kimono and disappear. Naruto caught her gazing sadly at Temari and his blood boiled when he saw the unhappiness in her face. Realizing that he would not be able to do anything, Naruto briefly turned back to face his wife. Temari blinked when Naruto turned to face her and let her see his emotions. After a month together, she was fairly good at reading him and she could see how much the Pinky's unhappiness made him angry. Still, she was rather proud of him when he visibly bottled it up and resumed his poker face. He knows he can't do or say anything now, but I suspect I haven't heard the last of this. I don't like her. She makes us Kunoichi look like useless cheerleaders, but no one should look that unhappy the day after their wedding. Temari wasn't exactly an emotional woman, but even she couldn't help but feel at least some sympathy for Sakura. Finishing the document she was working on, Tsunade looked up and read the currents in the room. Fantastic, she thought sarcastically. The Uchiha wants to kill Naruto, Pinky looks like someone killed her puppy, and Naruto looks like he wants to murder Sasuke right back. Knowing him, probably over how Sakura is acting. Still, at least one of these two couples looks solid. Naruto and Temari are standing rather close to each other. Thinking on that, a wide smile that scared the crap out of Naruto spread across her face as she mentally rubbed her hands in glee. Muhaha, I wonder how long it will be till I have blonde grandbabies. Mentally shifting gears, Tsunade stood and addressed the boys in front of her. As you are aware, with your marriages, you are both now considered the heads of your respective clans. Both nodded in response and Tsunade continued. I've called you here today to inform you of that and to take you to your first council meeting. For an open session like today, the respective clan heads will have their heirs attending, so you will see some familiar faces. Since neither of you have children of age, your wives will sit in as heirs. Again both boys nodded and Tsunade was actually fairly disturbed that Naruto hadn't spoken. It was odd. Very well, Uchiha, you and your wife may head to the council room. I need to speak briefly with the Uzumaki family regarding unrelated business. With a curt bow, Sasuke stalked from the room followed by Sakura. As the doors closed, Tsunade turned to the boy she considered her more or less adopted son. Talk, she commanded. Gomen, Ba-chan, Naruto sighed. I was having a hard time not punching the Tem, so I thought I should just stay quiet. Raising an eyebrow, Tsunade considered her words carefully. Naruto, I know what was making you upset, but I shouldn't have to remind you that you're married now, and so is Sakura. You can't still chase after her. Waving his hands defensively, Naruto uttered a denial. No, you got it wrong, Ba-chan. I know that, and I'm not still chasing her. It's hard to explain, but when I saw how unhappy she was, I was just really mad. Temari stepped up and entered the conversation. Hokage-sama, I've talked to my husband about this before and I think I might be able to explain a bit better than him. Naruto is a person that defends what's precious to him with all that he is, and I think he has sort of shifted Sakura out of a romantic category and into more of a sister-type role. So when he saw her looking so upset, it was more like a protective brother than a prospective lover. Tsunade drummed her fingers on the desk as she considered that. It did make sense, and as she noticed earlier, Temari and Naruto were standing far closer together than strictly necessary. She allowed a smirk onto her face. So, how was the wedding night? Ba-chan. Palming her face at Naruto's outburst, Temari replied, "It went well, Hokage-sama. The treaty obligations were taken care of without issue." She couldn't finish his sentence without blushing though. Ignoring the knowing grin on Tsunade's face, and the muttered curses about evil old hags from her husband, Temari felt it was a good idea to change the subject. "Gomen Hokage-sama, but don't we have a council meeting to attend?" Tsunade did a double take when she glanced at the clock. "Shit," she muttered. "We're running behind." Motioning Naruto and Temari towards the door, she noticed Temari's stiff gait. "Temari, would you like me to heal you? The seats in the council chamber aren't comfortable and you seem sore." Temari groaned as she considered her options. Yes, she did want healed, but Tsunade was smirking at her and it was embarrassing. "Oh well, I'm already embarrassed, might as well be comfortable as well." "Thank you for your generous offer, Hokage-sama, I would appreciate it," she managed to say fairly levelly. The green glow of medical chakra covered Tsunade's hands as she ran a standard diagnostic while she healed the girl. An odd feedback caused her to frown and she carefully scanned the girl again. Her eyes widened in surprise and she stepped back, her mind whirling. "Ba-chan, you alright?" Naruto asked her, concerned by her behavior. "Yeah, I'm fine, Naruto," Tsunade responded. "But I think we're going to be further delayed to the council meeting." Stepping back to her desk, Tsunade activated the seal that called Shizune, and the room was silent during the brief wait. As soon as Shizune entered, Tsunade instructed her to go inform the council that the meeting was to be delayed until noon as something required her attention. As Shizune left to carry out her instructions, Tsunade waked back to Naruto and Temari. "Alright, you two, we're headed to the hospital." Exchanging confused glances, Naruto shrugged and Temari spoke up. "Excuse me, Hokage-sama, but why are we headed to the hospital?" "I need to check up on something," Tsunade replied evasively. "Exactly what are you checking up on?" Temari asked with some heat. Tsunade sighed. "Fine, we're going to confirm or deny what I think I found." Temari clenched her hand into a fist as Tsunade refused to answer again. "Why are we going to the hospital? What did you find when you healed me?" Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose. "I think you're pregnant." "Already. Omake Shogi Wars. Naruto, have I ever mentioned how troublesome you are?" Shikamaru groaned, staring at the shogi board in his thinking pose. "I'm sure you've mentioned it before," Naruto replied with a wide grin. Shikamaru finally made his move, and Naruto reached down and instantly countered, causing Shikamaru to narrow his eyes in frustration. Naruto's random move had completely changed the flow of the game, again, and the Nara was forced back into his thinking pose. "Come on," Naruto whined, "even Temari doesn't take as long to move as you do." Aforementioned girl was not amused by her fiancé's comment. Smiling sweetly at him, "What was that, Naruto?" Nothing, Temari-chan," he stuttered out nervously. "That's what I thought," she said smugly. Shikamaru finally made his move and once again, Naruto simply reached down and moved at random. "Nay, I think that's checkmate, Shikamaru," he said confidently. Shikamaru's eyes widened in surprise as he scanned the board. Dropping back into his thinking pose, he was astonished to find Naruto was correct. At best he could draw the game out a handful of moves. "Yeah, I guess it is Naruto," he acknowledged in defeat. Temari jumped up and pointed. "See, it's not just me. How the hell do you do that?" she asked Naruto. He shrugged in response. "Like I told you, Temari-chan, I just look at it like a battle and the moves come to me." Shikamaru sighed. "Mendokusei." Tsunade frowned as she gazed out of her office window at the village. She hadn't expected something like this, but she knew she should have. After all, since when was Naruto anything close to normal? Several hours at the hospital had proven her to be correct. The odd feedback from when she healed Tamari had indeed been another faint chakra signature. What was extremely frustrating was that she had failed to cover contraception when she had the talk with Naruto. She'd just assumed the kunoichi had known. Unfortunately, and completely obvious in hindsight, Tamari had always been intended for a team with her brothers and no one had bothered to teach it to her. Politically, the news was great. The announcement of an heir to the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans had gone over with cheers and whistles at the council meeting, and the Sunagaku representatives and the Wind and Fire daimyos were all pleased. On a personal level, Tsunade was convinced that this was a disaster. She mentally cursed at her earlier thoughts about blonde grandbabies. Just her luck the Gaki would have knocked his wife up on their wedding night. She really wasn't worried about Tamari. The girl was fairly level-headed and had taken the news more or less in stride after destroying part of a training ground with her fan. No, the real problem was Naruto. There was no way he was ready for something like this, and add in the fact that a child would make him far more vulnerable as a target. Kami, what a mess. Unable to resist anymore, Tsunade slid her desk drawer open and pulled out her emergency sake, and took a pull straight from the jar. She was concerned that Naruto had disappeared after the council meeting, but she had a fairly good idea where he was. Glancing at the Hokage monument, she saw a small dot sitting on the Yondaime's head. According to Kakashi, that was where Naruto always retreated when he needed time to think things over. Now that he knows about his heritage, maybe it's also his way of talking with his father, she mused. Hey Harem, Jiraiya said, hopping in through the window. You know you're pulling me away from valuable research, right? Can it, you old pervert? She snapped testily. There are far more important things now than you peeping. Jiraiya dropped his facade, showing the serious shinobi hidden beneath his usual exterior. I've heard. He sighed. It's all over town already, and I'd bet anything Iwa and Kumo will know by the end of the day. This is not a good thing, Tsunade. This increases the danger he is in by a considerable amount. By himself or even just married, Naruto is really only threatened by Akatsuki. Add a child, even unborn, to the mix and I can see Kumo attempting to take the bloodline for themselves. Iwa will just want to crush it. Tsunade rubbed her temples as she replied. Yes, I'm aware of the problems. The question is, what do we do about it? We push him, Harem, we drive him to be as strong as he possibly can be, as fast as we possibly can. There are extreme risks to that, Tsunade said with a frown. Push him too hard, he breaks and we lose him. Standing up and heading out the window, Jiraiya paused, hand on the windowsill. Sometimes you just have to have a little faith, Harem. The Gaki is much stronger than most believe, all we have to do is help him along. He flashed her a pained smile. We owe him at least that much, don't you think? Tsunade watched Jiraiya leave silently. I guess the pervert's right. If anyone can handle this, it's Naruto. Still, I can't help but worry. Naruto sat on his father's head, idly spinning a Hiraishin kunai as he watched the sun set over the village. He was terribly confused and unbalanced, and he had hoped sitting on his father's head would help clear his head. Chuckling, he patted the stone with his free hand. Doesn't really work like that, does it, San? It wasn't like he was expecting the stone head to talk back, but it really was his only connection with his father other than the fox, and frankly, he really preferred the monument. A rustle of cloth alerted him to company and he instantly snapped alert when he didn't recognize the chakra. Whipping to his feet, he dropped into a guard stance as he carefully scanned his surroundings. Just within the tree line was a tall, bulky man in strange red armor that seemed to be emitting steam. Between the scratch in his Iwagakure Hitai and the ominous aura, Naruto knew why he was there. Ah shit, the last time I felt a something like this, Gaara was trying to kill me. Don't tell me, he thought. Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, son of Konoha no Kuroi Senko. I am Han. The man's voice was impossibly deep for someone his size. For the crimes of your clan, you shall die. The man charged forward with a punch that shattered the kunai Naruto tried to parry with. Staring briefly at the shattered kunai, Naruto realized that he was in serious trouble. The power it would take to simply break a Hiraishin kunai was considerable, and this man had just shattered one. Why is it always me? He thought bitterly as he hurriedly evaded the furious onslaught. Flipping back to gain some space, Naruto released his gravity seals and formed the sign for his favorite technique. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Han paused as his target suddenly multiplied. The Namikaze brat's technique was impressive, but he simply began popping clones as they charged. He was forced to use his steam to shield himself when the brat somehow combined wind and fire jutsu to send a firestorm at him. Naruto observed with narrowed eyes as Han deflected his clones' combined Gukaku and Daitappa with what appeared to be steam. What the hell? Steam. Fortunately, the steam provided him with an opportunity, and the clones nearest to Han rapidly ran through hand seals. Suiten Suoro no Jutsu. The clones called out, condensing the steam into the water prison Zabuza had used against Kakashi in Wave. Seeing Han trapped, several clones charged and slammed Rasengans into the man. Shit. Mud clone. Naruto swore when the trapped figure dissolved. Releasing the water prison, Naruto and his clones carefully searched their surroundings. A sudden burst of chakra was his only warning, and he barely rolled out of the way as Han erupted from the ground beneath him. Han watched as Naruto flipped back to his feet from his evasive roll. Very impressive for one so young. He stated calmly. I had hoped to do this quietly, but I see I have no choice. Naruto stared in horror as a bluish-white aura surrounded Han, one chakra tail swaying behind him. What one is he? He only knew Han could not be the one tail or the 9 tails. The honor or curse belonged to Gaara and himself. Holding his hand up, palm facing Han, Naruto called out. Stop. I do not wish to fight you, brother. Han's deep voice had more than an undercurrent of rage as he replied. Brother. You are no brother of mine. How dare you call yourself such? I see that you are a Jinchuriki, like me. I do not wish to fight my own kind. Naruto replied sadly. Jinchuriki. Han muttered in disbelief. So the great Namikaze couldn't resist making a Jinchuriki himself, could he? Preaching peace, then creating a weapon, what a hypocrite. Don't talk about my father like that. Naruto roared back. My father sealed the Kyuubi into me to save the village at the cost of his life. Please. Han sneered back. The Kyuubi could have been sealed some other way, just like the other Biju. The only reason they are ever sealed into humans is to create a weapon for the village. You're wrong. Naruto cried. Perhaps, Han conceded. But it won't be a concern for you after tonight. Even with his gravity seals off, Naruto was barely able to Kawarimi in time to avoid the bone-crushing kick Han slammed into him. Shit. He's a hell of a lot faster now, Naruto thought in a near panic. Deciding to stall, Naruto hid himself among his clones as he considered and discarded various attack plans. He ran out of time when Han slammed his fist into the ground and the shock wave dispelled his clones and threw him back through the air. Naruto's flight was stopped as he slammed into what appeared to be a wall of sand. Shaking his head to clear the ringing caused by that last attack, Naruto saw Gaara standing next to him, arms crossed in his brother-in-law's favorite pose. Naruto. The boy said calmly. Do you require assistance? Gaara. Naruto cried out happily. Thanked Kami. Yes, he's a Jinchuriki. Gaara nodded. Yes, that much is obvious. The beast is raging in my head over the power being used. Ah, Gaara, you aren't gonna go all insane on me, are you? Naruto asked cautiously as Han paused to size up this new addition to the fight. Be at ease, Naruto, I am here to help you. Gaara responded. Dropping back into a battle stance, Naruto looked relieved. That's great. Let's get him, he cried as he charged back into the fight. Han was forced back onto the defensive as Gaara and Naruto teamed up against him. His power was enough that Gaara could entrap him with his sand, but whenever he was forced to break out, he would find Naruto or a clone waiting with a Rasengan. The boys almost had him when Naruto, after quickly consulting with Gaara, decided to melt the sand into glass as Gaara trapped Han. Several Gukakyu, used by clones surrounding Han, managed to entrap the man in a glass prison. Standing next to Gaara, Naruto panted as he tried to regain his breath. There were times that he greatly envied Gaara's, "I'll just stand here and kill you with sand," approach to battle. A sudden surge of chakra snapped his head back to the glass prison and he cursed when Han broke free. The sudden change in his opponent's appearance disturbed Naruto a great deal. Han was no longer a tall man in red armor. Instead, facing off against the boys was something else, something very frightening. A dark chakra cloak surrounded a quadrupedal figure. Chakra horns protruded from its head and 5 tails swung behind it, tearing the ground as they lashed. "Gaara," Naruto said quietly, "I think we're in trouble." Gaara simply nodded. The figure that had once been Han formed a ball and appeared to swallow it. "Shit!" Naruto screamed in terror. "I've read about this, Bijudama, get out of the way." Shoving Gaara away from the attack, Naruto tried to dodge but was hit by the fringes of the attack, slamming him into a tree. Sliding down the trunk, Naruto stared in horror at the devastation caused by that single attack. A long trench started from where Han was standing and continued as far as Naruto could see through the forest away from the village. "Kami, it's a good thing I didn't dodge towards the village," he thought in shock. Gaara appeared by his side, bringing his attention back to the fight. "Gaara, we have to get him away from the village," Naruto said, determination blazing in his eyes. Gaara nodded his agreement and the boys took to the trees to lead their fellow Jinchuriki away from the village. In the village, alarms blared as shinobi rushed to get the civilians into shelters. The roof of the Hokage Tower was the nerve center of the village defense. Tsunade, Jiraiya and the highest-ranking officers were watching the battle using the Sandaimi's old crystal ball. "Damn it, Jiraiya," Tsunade snapped at her teammate. "Why can't we go assist Naruto?" "Harem, it's a fight between Jinchuriki and one of them has already begun using Biju Chakra. Any normal shinobi that tries to enter that fight will just be killed by the toxicity of that chakra. We already sent him the help we can give him when we sent Gaara. Right now, all we can do is protect the civilians and the village." Jiraiya didn't look pleased with his own words. He was worried that Tsunade might hit him and being dispelled would alert Tsunade that Jiraiya wasn't actually there. The orders to protect the village and stay out of the fight were ignored by a certain blonde kunoichi. Gripping her fan tightly, Tamari hurried to assist her brother and her husband. There was simply no way she was going to let her family fight without her. Naruto and Gaara stopped when they reached a clearing filled with sand. Looking around, Naruto shot Gaara an amused glance. "Well, this seems familiar." "Yes, quite an ironic place to fight." Gaara replied with the usual small twitch of his mouth showing his own amusement. "Yeah, well, I'm just glad you're on my side this time," Naruto said, getting his game face back on as Han arrived at the far end of the clearing. Gaara nodded as the boys observed the further change in Han's appearance. Sometime during the chase, Han had fully manifested and facing the boys was the full form of the gobi. It resembled some sort of horse with a odd elongated head, horns randomly jutting from it. 5 tails swung wildly behind it and it seemed to glare with malevolence at Naruto. "So, you can turn into a giant sand thing, and he can turn into that horse thing. Am I the only Jinchuriki that can't or something?" Naruto whined at Gaara. "Naruto," Gaara said calmly. "Whine later, fight now." Yeah, it just seems so unfair." Naruto complained. "Can you go full form and stay sane?" "Yes, Shukaku is not released unless I use the false sleep jutsu." "Alright, I think you had better do that. I'll summon Gamabunta." Biting his thumb and channeling as much chakra as he could, Naruto slammed his hand down. Kuchio's no jutsu. The large plume of smoke cleared to reveal Naruto standing on Gamabunta's head. "Jiraiya, why have you summoned me?" the humongous toad yelled. "Boss." Naruto called to him, Aro Senin didn't call you. I did. Rolling his eye up, Bunta puffed his pipe. Naruto, why have you summoned me? Pointing at the gobi, Naruto yelled impatiently. Mostly cause that thing is trying to kill me. Gamabunta eyed the gobi, and did a quick double take when Gaara in his full Shukaku form moved to his side. Gripping his blade, Gamabunta made to draw it and drive it through the sand but was stopped by Naruto. No boss, Gaara is with us this time. Is that so? You always find such interesting fights, Gaki. Gaara's voice boomed from his sand construct. Naruto, I will move to occupy him, you and your summon find an appropriate time to strike. Gotcha, Gaara, Naruto called as he moved to engage the gobi. You got any ideas, boss? Cause I've hit this guy with pretty much everything I've got so far. We could try a collaboration technique. Do you know any fire jutsu? Gamabunta asked as he dove forward attempting to strike with his tanto. Yeah, Naruto yelled, I know Gukakyu. Will that work? Jumping back as Gaara physically grappled with the gobi, Gamabunta responded, that should be perfect. When I use my jutsu, you need to light the oil with your fire. Gaara, get clear. As Gaara backed off, Gamabunta spewed a stream of oil as Naruto created a fireball. Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu, using the full seals and calling the jutsu allowed Naruto to create a much larger fireball than usual. It ignited the oil stream, creating a jet of flame that struck the gobi dead center. Naruto's shout of triumph was cut short when a tail came flying out of the smoke. Gamabunta managed to deflect the blow from Naruto but took the hit in his shoulder. Boss, you okay? Naruto yelled worriedly as Gaara moved back in to occupy the gobi. I'll be fine, Gaki, Gamabunta boomed back, but I need to return and heal. Grabbing Naruto with his tongue, Gamabunta placed Naruto on the ground then dispelled. Not one to say out of a fight, Naruto bounded up to stand on Gaara's Shukaku form. Gaara, you got any ideas, cuz I can't seem to hurt this thing. Naruto called from his new perch. Gaara emerged from the sand next to Naruto. I can bring out Shukaku. He offered. Naruto stared at Gaara in disbelief. I would really prefer not to. We may not have much choice. A Biju may be the only option. Gaara, Shukaku possibly hates me even more than he hates you. Let's call that a last resort. I have an idea. Buy me some time. What do you plan to do? Gaara questioned, launching more sand shuriken at the gobi. I'm going to talk to the fox. Naruto responded as he sat down on the sand. Rushing through the sewer, Naruto quickly arrived at the Kyuubi's prison. Rattling the bars, Naruto yelled, Oi, fox, wake up. Well, hello, warden. The fox sneered at him. I assume you're here for your rent. Look, I don't have time to fight with you. Naruto yelled back at the fox. I assume you know what's happening. The fox snorted. Of course I do, mortal. You got yourself into a fight with the gobi and now you need my help because you are a pathetic fool of a mortal. Gritting his teeth, Naruto banged his forehead on the bars. Yeah, that sounds about right, you egotistical tem of a fox. Now, can you help or are you really that worthless? He sneered back. Silence, you fool. The fox roared back. It is not my doing that has landed us in this mess, but I suppose I cannot have that five-tailed freak claim victory over me. You may have your chakra, now leave. A wave of red chakra shoved Naruto back out of his mind. Opening his eyes, Naruto was seeing red, quite literally. Glancing behind him, he noticed a red chakra tail bubbling and his hands appeared to be claws. Jumping off Gaara, Naruto began to claw and rip his way around the forelegs of the gobi in an almost berserker-like state. Unlike earlier wounds that healed instantly, the damage Naruto was inflicting with his claws stayed open and seemed to bleed chakra. Elated at finally being able to harm his foe, Naruto charged a Rasengan and slammed it into the leg in front of him. He was rewarded when the leg buckled and the gobi screamed in pain. Gaara, always a combat pragmatist, immediately enclosed the limb in sand and crushed it. A sadistic smile crossed his face as he and Naruto gained the upper hand in the fight. It seemed he could always find a good fight with Naruto around. Back in the village, a small crowd that had gathered around the viewing orb cheered as the boys began to take charge of the fight. Most of the Jonin watching the fight had been extremely worried when Naruto and Gaara couldn't seem to make damage stick to the Biju. They could feel the chakra flares from the fight clearly even at this distance, and most were amazed at the power being used. There had been concern when Naruto manifested a chakra tail. A fight involving a Biju certainly brought back memories of the Kyuubi attack even 13 years later. It was obvious from his actions that the boy was in control, which greatly reduced those fears. After all, it was highly unlikely Kyuubi knew how to use a Rasengan. For the few Sunagakur Jonin watching, the fact that Gaara was fully manifested but working with an ally was very welcome news. Many in Sunagakur had been highly suspicious when Gaara returned from the failed invasion and began trying to work his way through the shinobi ranks. The drop in body count was welcome, but many were very cautious in believing Gaara had truly reformed. The current battle was proof that Gaara had indeed changed, and several prominent Sunagakur Jonin began to consider the currently empty cage position thoughtfully. Having finished one of the Gobi's legs, Naruto and Gaara focused on the other foreleg. If they could cripple it, the fight was more or less done. Naruto, excited and running on the Kyuubi's bloodlust, mistakenly moved into a position where the Gobi could swipe at him with its tails. He was saved from a great deal of pain when a sudden wind slammed into the attacking tail, driving it back. Glancing over, Naruto saw Temari standing in a tree near the edge of the clearing, her fan held ready. His wife was obviously frightened. Two fully manifested Biju and another chakra-cloaked Jinchuriki were the stuff of nightmares for normal shinobi. A long-range fighter, Temari was obviously not going to get in close, but she was still here, fighting with her family. Back in Konoha, Tsunade was cursing the fool girl. She was going to get herself killed and then the shit would well and truly hit the fan. News of her pregnancy had already spread. If she died, a war with Sunagakur was all but unavoidable, and to that end, they had allies in Kumogakure and Iwagakure. On a personal level, Tsunade liked the girl, and couldn't imagine what her death would do to Naruto. For the first time in many years, Tsunade found herself praying to whatever deities might be listening for the girl's safety. Please, just stay alive, all three of you, she pleaded in her mind. Confident Temari had his back, Naruto dived back into the fight. The Gobi had wised up and wasn't allowing him time for more than quick hit-and-run slashes at its leg. Several times, Naruto had close calls, saved by timely attacks from his wife hidden back in the trees. Seeing Naruto stalemated, Gaara moved in on the Gobi's opposite side, forcing the Biju to divide its attention. The Gobi still had enough power to deflect Gaara's attacks, but it couldn't afford to ignore him. His sand was still very dangerous if unchecked. From her perch in the trees, Temari saw what her brother was doing and worried. It was true that Naruto needed a diversion to strike even with her covering him, but with Gaara on the other side, she was worried about possibly harming him. Her eyes widened and she dropped to the ground seeking cover when she saw the horse-looking thing create a giant ball of chakra and eat it. She didn't know what it was doing, but she didn't think it was a good thing. The released Bijudama poured through Gaara's sand, leaving a smoking glass hole through the body of his Shukaku form. It was fortunate for Gaara that the sand absorbed the blow and sheltered him from the strike, but he was out of the fight until he could reform most of his sand torso. He was just glad the Gobi hadn't aimed for the head. That attack would have killed him. Naruto growled as the Gobi focused all its attention on him. He was forced to simply dodge and avoid a wide variety of strikes from its leg, its tails and its head. This did not allow for him to attack and he felt his frustration mounting rapidly. Inside the seal, Kyuubi was watching the events with a great deal of interest. He was stuck here until he could find some way around or through the Shinigami's seal, and loath though he was to admit it, his current container was at least more interesting than the previous two. The ninjin was doing fairly well against the Gobi, which was good. It would be unseemly for the Kyuubi no Kitsune to be defeated by that five-tailed horse freak. As Naruto was forced to stay on the defensive, Kyuubi glared at the bars holding it. If only it was free to put that thing in its place. Gaara finally managed to fill the hole in his sand torso and rejoined the battle. The goby was not expecting him to recover that fast, and its mistake cost it the use of one of its tails. Gaara managed to crush it before the goby began to counter his attacks again. Naruto, freed up by Gaara rejoining the fight, was finally able to slam a Rasengan into the goby's other foreleg. Denied the use of its front legs, the goby crashed to the ground, tails flailing violently. As both Gaara and Naruto moved in for the kill, the goby proved it was still dangerous with a concentrated chakra pulse that destroyed Gaara's sand body. Seeing his brother-in-law falling, Naruto dashed over and caught the red head before he hit the ground. Seeing that Gaara was fine, Naruto turned back to the goby with a savage growl as he attacked. Out of chakra, Gaara retreated to his sister's position in the trees. Temari, he said wearily. You shouldn't be here. Temari spared a glance from the battle at her brother. The only time she had even seen Gaara look this worn was after his fight with Naruto in the invasion. Sorry little brother, she said, turning her attention back to the battle and getting ready to launch another attack. There was no way I was going to let my boys fight something like this without me. Gaara stared at her, confused. He was happy that his sister had come to fight with him, but he was afraid for her safety. Shaking his head to clear his confusion, he sank down on the branch to meditate. Since he could not sleep without Shukaku devouring his mind and soul, he learned to meditate after his defeat by Naruto to rest his body and mind. What interested him now was that as a side effect, it allowed him to regain his chakra much faster than he would otherwise, much like the restorative powers of sleep for normal shinobi. Naruto was getting tired and even more frustrated. He could hit and hurt the goby, but he was nowhere near landing a finishing blow. The only true weak point he could see was possibly its face, but the head was still dangerous. TCH, it's like one of those final boss battles in those RPGs Shikamaru likes to play. If only this thing had an arrow pointing at its weaknesses. To make matters worse, even with Kyuubi's chakra, he was getting tired. He couldn't keep this up for long. He also couldn't break off to rest because the goby would use the time to heal. For the first time in the battle, Naruto found himself pretty much out of moves, and that worried him considerably. Sensing its attacker weakening, the goby decided to strike the irritants in the trees with its tails. This turned out to be a fatal mistake. Seeing the tails lash towards his wife and brother-in-law, Naruto in his anger drew forth far more of the Kyuubi's chakra. A second tail formed behind the speeding figure as he intercepted the tail aimed at his family. Don't you dare touch them! He roared as he tore the tail completely off the goby. Using the extra power, Naruto overcharged a Rasengan with the Kyuubi's chakra, and moving so fast he was a crimson blur slammed it through the goby's chest. Screaming in pain, Han was forced out of his fully manifested form and driven to his knees. Clutching weakly at the ground, he began to laugh bitterly at his defeat by children. Standing over him, Naruto began to form a Rasengan to finish Han when his chakra cloak dropped. Without Kyuubi's chakra boosting him, Naruto fell straight onto his face in front of Han. As he dropped unconscious, seeing Temari's worried face, the last sound he heard was, Sabaku Soso. Followed by a sickening crunch. Hidden in the trees, Jiraiya allowed himself a small smile. For a moment he thought he would have to interfere, but the Gaki was improving very well. Glancing at the barely visible Hokage monument, he dipped his head. You would be proud, Minato.